Hey Cameron, good morning.
Morning.
All right, well, hello everyone. Happy Friday. Thank you so much for joining me. Last week I was so excited to get into our discussion. I forgot to offer an introduction, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that now. I am Gwendolyn Thompson. I'm the Campus Victim Advocate with Crisis Support Services of Nevada. I am available to support any Northern Nevada college student, faculty, or staff member, but I specifically work with TMCC to help the TMCC community. So I'm really excited for our chat we have today. I see we have both Aaron and Cameron from TNCC, which is wonderful. Thank you so much for joining. And then Crystal is a part of Crisis Support Services. She is our Sexual Assault Support Services intern, actually. So happy you can join us today too, Crystal.
Thank you.
And before we get started, I just want to ask everybody if you're comfortable being recorded. I would love to share these discussions with others afterwards. I'm seeing a couple head nods. Cameron, are you comfortable with us recording this? Okay, perfect. So today we're going to be talking about online safety, what that looks like, kind of what all that entails, specific to sexual abuse online. The reason why we're talking about this today is because April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. So I think that this is a really good opportunity to kind of talk about what that looks like when we're in this world of technology. Some of the things that we might discuss are a little bit sensitive. So I like to kick off these discussions with just a few moments to pause and breathe. So maybe you've had kind of a hectic morning. Maybe it's been the best morning of your life. However you're joining this conversation today, you are welcome. And I'm just so grateful for you to be here. So I like to take my breaths with my eyes closed. So I'm gonna just do 3 deep breaths. Please breathe whatever feels natural and comfortable to you. And this is just kind of an opportunity to allow us to arrive at the same pace and same time. So take this opportunity to just maybe feel your feet on the ground, your body in your chair, wherever you're at right now. I'm gonna take one more breath. Okay, so thanks again for joining me. So, all right, let's talk about online sexual abuse. To start, I'd love to hear from you guys. Hearing those words, online sexual abuse, can you think of any examples of what that might be? How would you guys define online sexual abuse?
I think that it would be, any kind of abuse that happens, right, like on a screen, right, or over an online app, that is and if to make it sexual abuse, sexual in nature, right? So that could be like bullying or harassment, or I know my son is in high school, and he was just telling me last night about this kid who has like harassed every girl that he knows for nude pictures of them over their cell phone. So that seems like online sexual abuse.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that, Erin. Chris or Cameron, do either of you guys have an example of what online sexual abuse might look like?
Unwanted pictures being shared that are sexual in nature.
Also, I have one of our coworkers. She was telling me that her granddaughter was being like targeted by a predator, and like asking for, like, soliciting information, asking where she was living, like trying to get kind of like sexual in nature too. So I think that that's a part of it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a couple different examples that we've shared here. And online sexual abuse is pretty vast. So I want to just go ahead and read a couple different examples to you all of what online sexual abuse or harassment could look like. So online sexual abuse can be any type of sexual harassment, exploitation, or abuse that takes place through screens. So like Erin said, that could be done through an app, through a web page, through your email, anything that you're using technology for. So it could look like sending somebody hateful or unwelcome comments based on sex. It could be sending unwanted requests to partners or to strangers to send nude photos or videos or live stream of sexual acts. It can be performing sexual acts on webcam without the consent of everyone involved or in an inappropriate setting, such as a work Zoom meeting. If you guys all recall, recently there was a news article from, I believe it was an NPR journalist who was masturbating on camera during a Zoom meeting. And that would be an example of online sexual abuse. Definitely not okay. It could also look like sharing private images or videos that were sent to you without the consent or knowledge of those who were involved. It can be sharing porn in spaces where everyone has not consented to view it. So if you're in a public space and you're viewing it on your own device, but other people have the ability to see and hear what's going on, if they did not consent to that, that's a form of online abuse. It can be grooming children to enable them for sexual abuse, whether that's going to be an online interaction or an in-person interaction. And then there's also online monitoring or stalking somebody through digital or electronic surveillance. So hearing some of those examples, I'm interested to hear from you guys. How prevalent do you think these concerns are?
Well, I'm guessing more prevalent than they should be if, people are feeling like it's okay to do those things on a Zoom meeting. And I'm guessing because that's the whole theme of this year's Sexual Assault Awareness Month, that it's probably a lot more prevalent than we think. And, like just with the conversation I had with my son last night, obviously I think especially younger people may not even realize that they've crossed the line into sexual abuse and sexual harassment with the way that they talk to each other or interact with each other through their social media and interactions on screens. Because I think it's almost like people feel like there's no consequences when it's through a screen or something.
Yeah, I would love to pause just because what you just said there, I think is really important to focus on. Totally, there is that misconception that because these interactions are occurring not in person, that it might not be as impactful or it might not be as harmful to the individual that's receiving this kind of treatment. And that is just absolutely not the case, right? So just because these forms of sexual abuse take place behind a screen doesn't mean that their impact on the survivor is any less real. In fact, it could actually cause for potential re-victimization and continued trauma just due to how easily through technology abuse, images can be reshared or recirculated on the internet, which would then lead to harming somebody even further than that initial act. So I'm really glad that you said that, Erin. Cameron, Crystal, do you guys have anything you'd like to add?
I just think in the age of technology, I mean, it's just kids are getting phones earlier. They're getting on all these different apps. Like there's parents can't control it. And so, I mean, I think since I'm in my daughter just got a phone and like I'm getting my master's in school counseling. So this is like, we talk about like online safety a lot. And it's just so interesting. Like even some of the games that she has, like embedded in the game system, like if you ask like what's your address or you say something sexually explicit, like it blocks out on some of like the games that she has. So I think the fact that that's even happening now, like game developers are making games that are like friendly for kids to not be like attacked or monitored. And even like talking to her about like she doesn't have any social media, but just talking to her about when you take pictures, make sure there's like street signs aren't behind you, like like locations aren't behind you, because if someone is stalking you, then that's something that they can find. And so I think it's much more common than we know, and it's probably something that's like way underreported too.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's great to hear that you're already incorporating some of these safety practices for yourself and for your family. It actually was my next question for you all. So, what does safety online mean to you? Are there safety practices that you're already utilizing for your or your family's technology usage? I'd like to hear about what you guys might be doing already.
I have an 11-year-old daughter, and she's starting to get interested in Snapchat and things of that nature. So we've already had conversations about, not connecting with people she doesn't know. We've had a few conversations. Some of her friends connect with others that, well, they say they're 12. It's like, well, do you know them in real life? Well, no, but they say they're 12. And just having that extended conversation, not just to my daughter, but to her friends, it's like, unfortunately, the way the internet is, they might not be 12. And what are they talking about? And just having that conversation. I think sometimes my daughter learns more hearing me talk to her friends than me talking to her directly about being safe with the internet like that.
For me, it's almost exactly the same because Kendall's 10. So having a lot of those conversations, like, but going back to the whole game situation, one of the things that we do is we don't let her have the headphones where she can speak to people on the game, because a lot of the games now have gone from away from like the chat feature to like actually wearing the headphone where you're like having a conversation with everybody in the games. And that's something to me that like we are constantly telling her like do not chat in the chat, like because a lot of those games nowadays like Among Us and Roblox, like it's just random people playing and it's just all live. So and then even with her having her phone, like some of the discussions that we've been having are like we're not going to be talking negative about someone because she's getting to that age where like they're going to start getting kind of catty. And so just having those open discussions with like what I'm hearing her talk about, what game she's playing and everything. We also have locks on everything. So her phone, her computer, her tablet, everything shuts down at a certain time. She has to request more hours if she's been on a game for certain hours. So, I mean, that has been one of my biggest fears because I grew up when like only people, like wealthy people had computers and they were connected to the phone line. So you had to like get off the phone to get on the computer. And so now it's like, we all have little mini phone computers in our pockets. And so it's just so much easier for kids to be, I guess I'm really focusing on kids because that's just like my whole life right now, like trying to figure out like how do I like manage this as a parent of a 10-year-old who's getting to this age. So, but yeah, I think we have it locked up like pretty tight.
Yeah, it sounds like, there's definitely a lot of practices that you guys have implemented. And that's what's important is having more than just, one safety precaution, kind of having that multifaceted approach. So I really love what you're doing. Those are some great ideas. I haven't heard of having time requests on certain game apps. So that's a nice way to monitor activity. So that is a lot of wonderful stuff for minors or helping our children. What about your personal safety or privacy practices? Do you yourself as an adult do anything on your own devices to help keep you safe?
I know, like a long time ago when, like it was when I started getting more active on like social media. I feel like I'm showing my age, but like I learned like, you should always turn off the location so people don't know where you are. That I try not to like post when I'm out of town or like my husband never posts when he's out of town until he comes back, like, cause sometimes he's gone this weekend. I feel safe with you all to tell you that. But like, I wouldn't want him to like post like that he's going to be gone this weekend and that, I'm potentially home all by myself, right? On social media. I think that people forget when they post things like that. Like, hey, we're like in Disneyland this weekend, come and raid my house. Cause no one's, I think people forget like how they can put themselves out there. Just like I took a self-defense class like a million years ago. And one of the things that they told us was, as a woman, you should never put like a personalized license plate on your car, like sexy grandma or something, because then you're just like inviting someone to be like, oh, this is a woman who's all by themselves driving. And, the reality of it is like, you have to protect yourself and you can't just be like, hey, this is Jen's car, and come on over to Jen's car. Cause you know what I mean? I don't know. So I try and be careful about like what I post about like what I'm doing or my location or my family's location or how my boys represent themselves, when my oldest one is the only one who's on social media, but he never posts. So I'm not ever worried about him, but you know what I mean? Like I just think you can, and I never like friend people I don't know. Like if randos are like trying to friend me, if I don't know you or if I don't know your friends, then I'm not interested in being your friend over the internet and things like that. So, and I try and I do, like, much like Cameron and Crystal talked about, like, I'm constantly having conversations with my kids about the same thing. Like, it's so easy for people to misrepresent themselves online. And unfortunately, we live in a time where you can't just naively trust everyone, even though that's, like my nature is just like to naively believe everyone's good. Like you have to be a little bit more offensive, about that. Defensive, offensive, I don't.
Yeah, those are all awesome practices. Is that you, Rita?
I'm sorry, and I apologize for being late. I looked at the time and I thought, oh, 10:30, and then that was for the movies, and then the groups. So it's totally, I'm sorry, really. I'm thankful that I'm here with you all.
Well, thank you for
And I'm Rosa.
Here. Rosa, okay, so nice to
Thank
meet
you for having. Yeah. Thank you, nice to meet you.
My name's Gwendolyn Thompson. I am the Campus Victim Advocate, and I'm so glad that you're here today. I'll go ahead and just get you caught up real quick on our conversation. I just want to check in with you first. Are you comfortable with these discussions being recorded?
Thanks for asking. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So what we're talking about is our interpretations of what being safe online means, whatever safety practices that you are using for yourself or maybe for your family. The floor is open. I would love to hear about what you do to keep yourself safe.
Maybe this is a little drastic, but I'm really not the social media person. So what I've done is I've just not participated. So, instead of everybody saying, oh, I'm on Facebook and I'm this, and I have my same, oh, you guys, nobody laugh. I have my same AOL account for my, I've had it for like 35 years. So at any rate, but I started at birth. And, listening to you, Erin, 2 days ago, my daughter, who is just 30, called and she said, oh, Mom, someone got in touch with me on my Facebook from high school. And I said, oh, and she said, Mom, I don't remember this person though. And they asked, hi, we had such a great time in high school. Where do you live? And she said, I just felt not good about it. And so she said, I don't want to be mean, but I don't think. And I said, no, Katie, first of all, you don't know who that is. You don't remember the person. So it's not like, they're in your best friend group there in high school. And then it's a male and they're asking where you live. So no, my vote is no. So at any rate, thankfully, she's still open to hearing my 2 cents.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Rosa. That's, very wonderful safety practice. Don't accept friend requests from people you don't know, or don't share your personal information if you're not comfortable. So, talking about online abuse, if we recognize that abuse doesn't always come in the form of physical threats or violence, that online behavior is abusive if it makes you feel scared or if it threatens your safety in any way. So that's a pretty wide umbrella of what might possibly be abuse. And the challenge is digital technology can be easily misused either through the use of creating fake accounts. We've talked about social media. It's so easy nowadays to either catfish where you're pretending to be somebody else, or you just create a whole new imaginary persona. And then there's also spyware or stalkerware. How familiar are you guys with spyware and stalkerware?
Stalkerware?
Okay, awesome. Glad we get to have this conversation. So, spyware and stalkerware is the use of some type of app, software program, or device in order to electronically surveil somebody without their knowledge or consent. So typically it enables an abuser to secretly monitor or record what an individual is doing on their own personal devices. There are over 200 apps that allow for this type of invasive, intrusive, and dangerous misuse. So that's why we're talking about it today, because it is unfortunately a reality of living in the 21st century when we are so reliant on technology and digital devices. A little bit earlier, I asked you guys, how prevalent you thought this was, and I just wanted to share a few statistics with you. Sometimes hearing the data or the number can kind of help. So if we're looking in the year of 2019, a lot of really interesting studies happened. The first one that I want to share with you all is one that was done by NPR. So they surveyed 72 domestic violence shelters. 85% of the domestic violence workers that they spoke to had assisted a survivor that had been tracked through their GPS. That is an absurd amount. Additionally, in 2019, the FBI had nearly 500,000 reports of an incident involving either spyware or stalkerware. The exact number is 467,361. Again, that's an absurd amount. And then a study done in the same year, 2019, by the Kaspersky Security Network showed that the number of cases using stalkerware rose 35% from the year of 2018. So to me, that's showing that this is a problem that is continuously increasing. And so I'm really glad that we get to have this opportunity today to chat about it and discuss, safety precautions that we can all take. What are your guys' thoughts on hearing that?
Well, how do you even know if someone's using that on you? That's really scary.
Right, it is. And that is one of the most scary parts of this type of abuse is sometimes it can go unacknowledged for a really long time. So if we think about the individuals that are, perpetrating and using digital and online abuse in order to hurt people, there's a few different things that I want us to take into consideration. So the first would be the difference between non-consensual pornography and sextortion. Have you guys heard of these words before, sextortion and non-consensual pornography?
No.
Okay. So non-consensual pornography, nowadays a phrase to describe this is revenge porn. That might be something you're familiar with. And that is when an individual obtains, shares, or distributes intimate images from another person without their permission. Typically, this is done to humiliate somebody, and it's not done with any threats or coercion. So it's typically an act that's done out of revenge in hopes to embarrass somebody. Sometimes we see this in partners after a breakup. The ex might want to share some of these images that they had initially gotten consensually, but now that they're sharing or distributing, that is when it becomes non-consensual pornography. And then similarly, thank you, Cam, thanks for joining. Similarly, sextortion is when somebody obtains these intimate images and then threatens to expose or distribute those images for the primary purpose of either obtaining additional images in sexual nature, getting sexual favors in person, or again, whether that's through live streaming, video cam, however, or they're asking for money. So sextortion is when there are threats and coercion involved. I'm going to pause there. Any questions or thoughts on sextortion and revenge porn? Okay. So Erin, you brought up a great question, right? What do we do when we don't know that this is going on? So in those cases of revenge porn and sextortion, an individual at that point likely knows that something is happening because they're either seeing their intimate images being posted, or somebody's told them that they've seen them on another site, or the abuser is directly interacting with them, threatening them, or trying to coerce them to do more that they're uncomfortable with. So in those cases, okay, you already know that it's going on. When we're thinking about situations that we've talked about where it's like the secretive monitoring through using the spyware, the stalkware, some red flags would be if an individual in your personal life seems to have really suspicious behavior or just knows more than they should. So when we're thinking about those situations, perpetrator and abuser, it could potentially be somebody in your personal life, or it can be a complete stranger. So thinking about somebody that would be in your personal life, maybe it is a current spouse or an ex-partner or a friend. If you have that, using your intuition or that gut feeling that something is wrong, they just kind of always know where you're at, they know what you're doing. Like I said, they just know things that they shouldn't. Maybe they are referencing a conversation that you had privately with somebody else. Those would kind of be something for you to consider. And then maybe start to bring your awareness to, has there been spyware or stalkerware installed on my device? So some of the things that spyware and stalkware can do, it's pretty complex, right? If we think about our digital footprint, because nowadays, like I said, technology is mandatory for everything that we do, there's so much that goes into it. So these surveillance could be of your text messages, of your phone calls, having access to your camera, whether that's on your phone or your laptop, knowing what your social media direct messages or conversations look like, your internet browsing, history, passwords, your files, your calendar, your contact list, online banking. So if anybody is harvesting your messages or your phone calls, or they're using location tracking in order to monitor you, that would be an indication that there's some spyware and stalkware installed on your phone or your device. So when we are thinking about how we can stay safe, there are a few precautions that you can take. And we've talked about a lot of that already through your guys' suggestions of not accepting strange requests, not posting when you're going to be gone on vacation, not having any personal identifying information on your vehicles. When you post photos, not having locations behind you. All of that is wonderful and definitely something that you can implement into your daily practice. When you're concerned and getting one of those red flags that things might be taken a step further to where there's that spyware or stalkware installed on your phone, some suggestions from professionals involve a few things. One would be reaching out to a victim service provider. So an advocate such as myself, a therapist or a counselor, domestic violence or sexual assault hotline. All of these are great people to reach out to with these concerns. You want to consider that everything you are doing, however, on your device is being seen by the abuser. So best practice would be to use a safe device, one that you don't believe that perpetrator would have any access to. So whether that's a computer at a public library, your school, work, or maybe even using a friend's or family member's device. From there, once you get connected with the victim service provider, the next step would be talking to a technology provider. So sometimes people might want to go to like the Genius Bar at Apple or Geek Squad with Best Buy. I'm not saying that they wouldn't be able to support you, but just typically in those situations, they don't necessarily have the stalking or online sexual abuse training in order to support you. And they might actually make some recommendations that could further endanger you. So the best person to get in contact with would be to have a technology consultant with a clinical computer security specialist. So a clinical computer security specialist typically works hand in hand with the victim advocate. So a lot of times the survivor and the advocate can go into this meeting together, and then that security specialist will hear what's going on, listen to the concerns, kind of identify what could potentially be done, and make those recommendations to create a new safety plan that will support that individual. That was a lot, so I'm going to pause right now and kind of open up the floor to you guys to any thoughts that might be running through your head.
Have you worked with any in the Northern Nevada area?
Yes, I have, and I'll tell you that it's very, very challenging. Just because thinking about how complex everything in our lives are intertwined with technology, it's hard. It's not as simple as just blocking a person on your phone, right? It really is, it's this whole lifestyle adjustment trying to get you to have safe interactions online.
It just reminds you like how technology is so awesome, but it's also such a curse too. Like there's, you know, there's so many great things to it, but there's so many like scary things. I didn't even know there was such a thing as a clinical technology specialist. So if I didn't hear that, I would have just like gone down to the Apple bar and been like, what's going on with my phone?
Right. And not to say that that's not a bad option, right? It's just there's the potential that maybe a suggestion would be, okay, well, let's delete these apps off of your phone, which again, if the perpetrator already has that spyware or stalkware installed on your device, then that could tip them off. So, yeah.
So I have a question. Can they install this from wherever they are?
That's a
I
good
mean, they don't
question.
need to get hold of your device in order to like.
As far as I'm aware, thank you so much, Erin. I'm glad you could join. As far as I'm aware, it's most common when the individual does have access to your device. So that's why I'm thinking perhaps it's a, you know, former spouse, somebody that, you know, you maybe had a one-night stand with, and when you were asleep, they installed this on your phone or did whatever it was they needed to do. But there is also the potential for strangers to hurt you in this way. I'm not 100% familiar how they would get the spyware, stalkware installed on your device. I think it's more of the electronic surveillance that they might be able to do, or the hacking, to where they hack into your accounts and then they have access to your personal information. So that example from your daughter, that definitely sent some alarm bells off in my head. So somebody saying, hey, we went to high school together. Where do you live now? That's absolutely a tactic that perpetrators can use, or start a casual conversation. What's your favorite animal's name? You know, what was the first vehicle that you owned? Where did your parents meet?
She immediately blocked. She said,
Good.
what do you know, like, she doesn't want to be mean.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, we have this kind of like microcosm, and I'm thinking really what this has to do with, and I've given this a lot of thought. These are basic trust, not just stalking or cybercrime. These are really far reaching within each one of us to our kind of STEM value.
Mm-hmm.
And so trust in a relationship, or what you would think would be a relationship, you would assume that the other person is operating in the same set of values in the system.
Mm-hmm.
But really, what we're finding is this whole And I'm looking at society now on a continuum. So, you know, you have people that are way over here and people that are way over there. And both of those way overs, not so good.
Right. Yeah. I love
And
that.
having to close ourselves off, you know, this more and more and more, you know, like to the point where I remember my mom and dad having a conversation about putting bars on the windows. And my mother was like, well, you know, and it'll keep everybody safe and it'll just be on the bottom. My father was like, well, you know, why are we having to live in behind bars? And, you know, there was this whole thing, and it's really kind of true. I mean, I'm not sure what is happening in all of the degradation of society, because I think it was yesterday, I just heard on the news that Russia has hacked. I think that's what they were, I don't know if it was hacked, but somehow they got into like the departments, I mean, like 15 agencies, including Microsoft and blah, blah, blah. And you're right. What did you call it? You said something. Harvesting.
Mhm.
Harvesting information? Like, it's frightening.
Yeah. It
And we're
absolutely is.
exposed because the cities really don't realize the potential of these like perpetrators. You know, with the tax rolls and the, you know, everything is just out there in mass quantities. I don't know. You get in your car, you wonder because they can track you in your car.
Right. Because technology is really flowing into every device. I mean, nowadays you can post a Twitter status update from your refrigerator. You know, everything has now these
That's true.
you know, these ways to connect, which I really like what Cameron said earlier. You know, it's like technology is such a great thing, but then it's also a really, really scary thing. And I love that you brought up the concept of trust and how that looks very different. And same thing with consent. Now it's not just you know, consent from what we're doing in person with one another, but it's this idea of digital consent. So if I am choosing to share something with you, we have to have this consent established of what can happen with what I'm choosing to share with you, right? And I just want to put out there, I know that this stuff, it's disheartening to hear when you start to consider how easily accessible it all is, and the potential to be harmed in this way. My personal opinion is I don't think that it's society as a whole is like suddenly becoming awful. I think that those perpetrators have always existed, and now they have these different means accessible in ways to harm or in ways to find victims. So, you know, if we just think about the spyware and the stalkware, it's illegal to even install that, right? It violates a whole wide range of laws, from stalking to harassment to just unauthorized access of a device. So it is illegal to monitor a person without their permission or knowledge. But then we think about, oh, my lights are turning on. But then we think about, you know, if you have an iPhone, there's the Find My Phone or the Share My Location. Or if you have Snapchat, there's the Snapchat Maps where you can see where all of your friends are at any given time. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
I think people need to have conversations with their friends as well, because even if you're careful on social media, you know, friends can tag you in photos, or they can post a meme and, you know, tag you on it, and people you don't know can get information from that. You know, and you can't monitor all your 500 friends on social media, you know, who they're connecting with, pictures with you in there, you getting tagged in them, or your children. whatever. Or, hey, I'm house sitting at so-and-so's house, her dog's so cute. Well, that just noted that you're not home, they're by themselves with a tiny dog, you know? So just having those conversations, you know, to support each other and safety as well. It's not no one's an island. At least with social media, you at least have one friend on there if you're using it.
Right. You know, I like that you use that phrasing, no one's an island, because when I think about, you know, my involvement on social media and online, it kind of feels that way. Like right now, I feel like I'm an island because I'm alone in this office and you guys are alone in your office or your car. Crystal, thank you so much for joining us from your car. And you know, Erin brought that up earlier with because we have this physical distance, even though we're virtually connected, sometimes it feels like we're alone. So I really, really like that you brought that up of being able to have those communications with your friends and, you know, even just the awareness of this stuff is going on is taking a safety precaution. You know, joining this discussion today, this is one step in helping yourself stay safer online. Having those conversations with your friends and your family members of your boundaries, what you consent to, what your expectations are of how they portray you on social media is huge and absolutely a conversation deserving of having. And then conversely, if somebody doesn't respect that, what do you do then? What's your next step then? So kind of would like to hear from you guys, whether it's what we've chatted about so far today, or maybe what you would have done previously. But if you had concerns for how an online interaction was going, if you felt unsafe, if you felt maybe somebody was monitoring your device, what action steps would you take?
Well, based on what you just said, I had never heard, like Erin, I never heard of using, well, you said to call a victim's service provider, and then there might be a need for a clinical computer specialist. I'd never heard of that ever. I mean, I wouldn't have thought to call a victim service provider. You know, it's just interesting to be, you know, there's a vulnerability that seems to span the life cycle. You know, you're vulnerable when you're 3 to 7. You're vulnerable when you're 8 to 12. You're vulnerable when you're 13 to 15. You know, you're just vulnerable. And nowadays, if someone isn't like, you know, I spy with a magnifying glass watching, you know, like what's going on, you know, you have vulnerable children and your life is vulnerable. So, I mean, you know, you just have to be careful. You just have to be really, I never put my GPS on. I mean, if I'm looking for an address, I put it on at that moment. But, and I don't ever, you know, try to get online in airports or any of that. There's only so much you can do. I mean, if somebody's gonna like zap you from, you know, or your refrigerator, my girlfriend has her drapes, her furnace, her refrigerator, her oven. It's all online. She can turn her oven on as she's driving home. And people have their key ability to get into their houses online.
Accessibility, it's all accessible now. Yeah. So hearing you say all of that, I think what it really shines a light on for me is being able to empathize with survivors who are in this situation, who don't know what to do, don't know who to turn to, don't know how to handle this kind of abuse and trauma that's happening to them. We're coming close to our time. I do just want to share one case study with you that I had the opportunity to listen to. A prosecutor from Connecticut recently had this very large case where a man was online abusing and harassing and stalking over 20 victims. This happened over the course of about 4 years. And when it initially started, it was maybe one or two females, and he did know these girls personally. He said he just thought that they were cute. He wanted to hack into their stuff, see if maybe he could find any nude photos of them or incriminating information. And then once he realized he had the ability to do so, it became an addiction. He then started targeting girls that he had never met personally in his life, but because he was able to access their information as well, they became, unfortunately, a victim in this horrible ongoing process. So when one of those initial victims reported to law enforcement, unfortunately, law enforcement didn't have the computer expertise or knowledge in order to support them and unfortunately take that report seriously for there to be any action. So it wasn't until a few years later when a different detective had gained a report of this online abuse going on that he investigated historic reports to see if this was related, and it turned out it was. Like I said, there was over 20 victims. So it is very scary when you think about it, but more so it's scary because there's still a lot unknown. So I, again, just really thank you guys for being willing to listen and participate in this discussion, just to, again, bring our awareness to it. So you guys have already shared some wonderful safety tips and wonderful safety precautions that you've already started to implement. And I think that must have come from this years of experience of technology and information and education that you've already heard. So I hope that today this discussion just put something else on your awareness specter, just something else for you to consider. Or if you do hear of this happening to somebody else, maybe you could have a little bit more compassion for what they're going through and recognize that their experience of abuse is just as realistic and impactful and harmful as somebody that's going through a physically abusive situation or a sexually abusive situation in person.
Well, and I think that if you're going into the field, Chris, are you going into the field of counseling, or?
I'm a bachelor's level social worker, and I'm working on finishing my graduate degree. So yeah, short answer, yes, I plan to be a clinician. Yeah.
Are you at UNR? That's a great program. That social work program, that you'll see me in a lot of training. I say, your guys' program rocks. I mean, what you do at CPS, I mean, all over the community, it's outstanding. So good for you for getting in and going. And I'm teaching up at TMCC, and typically I teach the TMCC high school 10th graders. So this is prime time stuff. And I feel like, just so you know, Gwendolyn, the more I know, the better my service, because I need to stay one step ahead. Once these 10th graders get into that team, they're like, oh. And if I'm, the least bit, like, oh, I didn't know that, they're like, ah, so I have to be kind of like, the knowledge person ahead of the curve a little bit. And I also have to pick up when something doesn't really smell right. That intuitive sense of self is critical at the age of 14, 15. And I always tell people, if you're thinking no, then let's practice no. And my book, actually, that I teach out of, has a whole section on no, how to say no.
That is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like you
Yeah.
said, that intuition is absolutely, I think that is our internal safety measure, right? If something in us, in our body, in our heart, in our mind feels uncomfortable, absolutely lean into that. That's nature telling you that something is wrong. So I'm so glad to hear
But
that you
look at
teach
that.
that.
Here's somebody, my daughter, I mean, who's
Mhm.
grown up with all this stuff and calls me to say, you know, like, well, I don't want to be mean.
Yeah.
Be mean, please.
Yeah. And it's not being mean, it's self-preservation, right? And
Oh, you
so
can always change your mind.
right. And in an act of self-preservation that is full of self-love and self-compassion and just allowing yourself to be safe and keep your boundaries intact. So I'm so grateful that she reached out
But
and shared that with you.
as women, we're told to be selfless. Like, oh, let's be maternal. Maternal means what? You
Mhm.
know, like, what exactly are you defining that as?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a whole nother discussion topic we'll have to do another time because I have a lot of thoughts on that. So yeah.
Okay.
I think I just want to conclude today's discussion just kind of again with an overview of how to stay safe. Again, I hope that this wasn't alarming or gonna terrify you to use technology. That definitely wasn't my intention. Again, whatever your intuitive ideas are for keep yourself safe, follow those. So if it's not sharing your location settings on apps, that is okay. If it's just not having those apps on your phone or even creating those social media profiles, it's okay. If you would like to use social media, I encourage you to read their security, their privacy policies, their security policies.
I mean, look at LinkedIn.
Mhm.
As soon as you do a LinkedIn, they get your entire email list.
Yeah, and that's one thing to consider. Thank you so much for bringing that up. A lot of times when you're making profiles on websites or apps, it will ask you for your personal information. It will ask for access to this and that. See if that's really something that's needed for the app or for that website to be functional. So by doing that, by researching the platform as well to find out who the developers are, if they take these safety precautions in mind, all of these are excellent ways to help keep yourself safe. But ultimately, I think what I would love for us to all leave with is again, if anything feels unsafe, if anything feels like it's threatening you, feel free to reach out to somebody to talk about that. There might
Well,
be something that's
Gwendolyn,
going
I
on.
just want to say one more thing because I think it's important for you to know. A lot of people are getting on this neighborhood app. I forget what it's called, but there's something
It's
that
Neighborhood.
pardon?
It's called Neighborhood.
Oh, it is? Oh,
Yeah.
see, all right, well, there you go. I was like, got that one. But at any rate, if you look into what you said, which I did, they sell your information, countless people. Walmart, I mean, the sky's the limit.
Right.
So here you are thinking, oh, I lost my dog. I put it on neighborhood, you know, yeah. And you give them your address.
Yeah. Yeah. And so just
Join the
thinking
neighborhood.
about if the risk is worth the reward for your personal safety. So taking that into consideration might help. Yeah. She says, nope, not for me. Yeah. So
Not for me.
I think,
You know, I'll get my information when I walk the dog.
yes.
My little dog, by the way.
Right. All right. So I think that is what I had to share with you all. Again, there is a lot more information for all of these topics. I tried to keep it as brief and introductory as possible. So if you're interested in more resources or you want to talk further, feel free to reach out to me and I'd be happy to talk about this or maybe do another presentation in the future diving more into these topics.
Would you be interested in coming into my class?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, do you have like an email or some?
Yeah, I can go ahead and put that in the chat.
Are you at TMCC? Can I just put Gwendolyn? Do you have a last name that's in there, or is it G something at TMC?
Yeah, it's G Thompson.
Okay.
Or you can always reach out to the campus advocate email, and that's just campusadvocate@cssnv.org. And I put that in the chat here.
Okay. Oh, good. Maybe next semester, because I have 32 kids per class.
That would be wonderful. I'd be happy to do that. And sorry, just the very last thing I wanted to leave you all with, I know I said there are over 200 apps out there that offer the spyware and the stalkerware. Google Play and the App Store do their best to remove those apps and block those apps once they're aware of it. So the number one safety precaution, if any of this stuff is happening, document it. And then, like I said, reach out to a victim service provider so that they could help you create a safety plan. Because on the flip side of the bad apps, there are tons of wonderful apps that can help you stay safe, can protect your technology, can block your VPN, all of that information. So technology can also be used to help protect you as well. All right, you guys, that is everything. Thank you so much for being here. I had such a great time just chatting with you. And if you'd like to join us next Friday, we're going to be talking about rape culture and what that is. So I'd love to see you there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sounds great. Thanks. Nice to meet you, Crystal. Have a good weekend, everybody.
Bye, everyone.